Today I'm going to be reviewing the Genesis G70. This is something I also shot while I was at Motor Studio, and afterwards I've actually got to experience the Genesis G70 at the track, and I'll give my impressions on that. So first off, I mean, let me just say how handsome and attractive or this well proportioned the car is, right? It's very subtle, and you know what? Something about it is very alluring. Right? And for me, I think it's the perfect size. Cars these days is just way too big, right? Way too big. But this size, I think is perfect. The exterior has a bunch of LEDs, and unlike Hyundai, which I talked about in my other video, I think Genesis does have some uniformity in their designs. They have a certain grille and certain lights that you could kind of, make off as distinct that it is a Genesis. And yeah, they do have the badging, which kind of looks like a Bentley, but you know what, it's grown on me. I didn't like it at first, but it's okay. Anyways, inside the cabin, it's also really well laid out. I think it has a perfect amount of screens and buttons, right? I talked about in my other video with the Sonata that has just too many screens, but it has a perfect blend, minus the digital gauges. I really still hate that, right? I actually drove this on the track. I drove this on the track, and reading on the track was just too many numbers that are switching places too fast. I didn't know what the hell was going on, right? But the gauges, I think humans naturally are better at noticing how much something went up by shapes, right? It would have been easier, but it was just ludicrous. That's the one bad thing. Or actually there's a couple of things, but I'll mention later. The seating position's actually quite good. It's not too high. I think cars lately have been just sitting way too high. You could get it down pretty nice and low. The steering wheel is definitely better than the Sonata, because I actually prefer 3-spoke steering wheels, right? And it's multifunction, has everything on there. I think they're gonna update the interior a little bit more soon, because the navigation screen on this one is not that big, and the Sonata, I have a feeling that they're gonna go the way of the Sonata. I know this is up for a refresh because in Korea this car's been out for almost 2 years now, or over 2 years. But you know what? I could already see what they're gonna do. They're just gonna add more screens, right? And you know what? I think it's fine the way it is, minus the navigation screen. I have to admit, the navigation screen is kind of small, right? So if they change that, put some more interior lighting like they do in all the disco cars, right? Make it glow and stuff. I'm not sure if I'm into that at all, but I read somewhere that Hyundai or Genesis, they poached some guy from Bentley to do the interiors, and you could definitely tell the red stitching and on the quilted seats. I mean, it looks awesome, right? It looks awesome, and it definitely looks like they've taken a page out of Bentley. The color contrast is actually surprisingly good, although it doesn't look all that great on video, but when you sit inside, it's actually really pleasant. The only downside about the interior of this car is the back seats. The back seats are so cramped, right? I think if you're like 2 adults, I think it'll be okay, but you have no leg room, right? And there's nowhere to actually really put your legs. That kind of made me, that's the only thing that really put me off about this car, right? The lack of leg room was really, it felt uncomfortable, and I was in there for only like 2 minutes trying to film this, right? A couple days after, I actually signed up to go to this Genesis Driving Academy, and they do this like every couple weeks, or I think like every 2 months, at a circuit, right? So I went to a racetrack that's about like 2 hours from Seoul, and you get to drive it in pretty extreme situations, right? So I got to do launch control like 10 times in a row, and the car, it had no problem. I actually wanted to try to, take the back end out, but obviously with the H-track, I couldn't do that. So once you get to the driving center, you just go wait in a lounge, right? And you know what? I've been to the BMW driving school, and this Hyundai driving school or Genesis driving school that they made up, it seems like such a makeshift job, right? I don't know if this is temporary or they're gonna do this for forever. But you know what? They really need to up the game on this. It did not feel luxury at all, right? And it's pretty competitively priced, or it's not competitively priced, because the BMW Driving Center, you could check out my other video, is much better. So you go outside, You get to pick one of the Genesis G70s out there. They're all 3.3 turbos with H-tracks. So what are my driving impressions? The car is actually quite capable. Acceleration seemed pretty quick, but because it's so quiet in the cabin, you don't really notice how fast you're going. I know the recording sounds like the car is really loud, but it's not, right? I actually increased the volume to make it more apparent. When you see the cars just go pass by on the track, right, you really can't hear it at all. The steering is actually kind of disappointing, right? The car handles well, but the steering, seems very, to me, it seemed numb, right? And I had a Elantra Sport, 6-speed, up until like 2 months ago, and that actually had quicker steering, right? I actually felt like that had better feedback, right? Even on the sports setting, it really didn't feel all that stiff. The ride was actually quite pleasant. Obviously I was on the track, so I can't tell, but the ride was actually pretty firm, and this car, it really felt capable. As far as the engine goes, does it feel like 370 horsepower? I don't think so, right? I think, it definitely didn't feel like 370 German horsepower. It was quick, but I don't think it was 370 horsepower quick, right? I think it was more like 300. This does 0 to 60 in approximately 4.2 seconds or so, around there. And to be honest, it didn't feel that fast. So would I recommend buying this car? Yes, but not for retail price. I mean, I think it's way too expensive, right? I know Genesis is trying to compete in the luxury segment, but you know what? Yes, their cars are good, and yes, they have some engineers from BMW M Division that's doing all the layouts and stuff and foundation work, but it's still lacking in certain areas, right? So if they were more competitively priced, I definitely say get it. But if you're paying the same price for a BMW, I don't think it's a great deal, right? So if it's priced around like fully loaded for 45 grand, yeah, definitely. But over here in Korea, this is near $55,000, right? Which is insane.